Hello, and welcome back to my channel, Forever Orchids. I'm Tracy. Guys, this is my biggest, largest Phalaenopsis in my collection. This is Phalaenopsis Maraldee. I did a video a couple months ago on an introduction to this plant. She's a big girl. In that video, we talked about how this new leaf here, which at the time was much smaller, we were hoping, that it was going to get as large as this one. I think we've accomplished that. In that time period, she has grown another leaf, started to anyway. Lots of roots. This root here was much shorter in the previous video. Look at how much longer it has gotten. We have more root tips growing. There's lots of new root tips all around the side here. So I'm a little nervous, not to be quite honest. She hasn't been repotted in a while. I'm gonna say maybe 3-4 years, maybe. I don't really remember when the last time was that I repotted her. So we're gonna take her out of the pot. Together we're gonna see her condition, and probably gonna have to put her back in the same pot, but just with fresh media. I've already got that over here to the side, already mixed up, ready to go. I do want to tell you one thing that I've done so far. I wet her down really good, wet the roots down, and then I just took the tag. Some of the roots had started attaching themselves to the side of the pot. So once they were wet, all I had to do was just take the tag and just ever so gently slide them around the roots. And you don't want to do it forcefully, just do it ever so slightly, and it will get those roots to break the bond that they've got going across the plastic here. There's just a little bit of vellum that was lost, not a whole lot. I don't think it's going to set her back and affect her and do any harm to the plant. She's planted in sphagnum moss and bark. We're going to put her back in the same thing. Now, the bloom spikes here, I'm not going to cut those off. If you go back and watch the other video with the introduction, you will see that this is the first bloom spike that she had in 2022. And she grew this long one and had 4 flowers at this end. Now, it did not turn brown. When your Phalaenopsis orchids, when the stems turn brown and go all the way back down to the base, that's a good time that you can go ahead and cut them off. You don't have to cut them off. You can leave them. This is a mature Phalaenopsis, and she can support all of her new growth, her new roots, and keeping these stems. What happened was in 2023, back in February, when she first opened her blooms, she grew this little branch right here on the next node, actually 2 nodes down from where she had 4 flowers. She grew this branch, and then she grew this new bloom spike. So I don't have to cut them off. I'm not going to cut them off. A lot of people are just like, oh, you have to cut them off. Let the plant have energy. That's fine. But guys, I've had this plant for over 23 years. So I know my plant. I know this plant can support these flower spikes right here, and is perfectly fine. So let's get her out. It's going to be a little wet because I did and that's why I've got this tray down here, because I needed to soak it to go ahead and get the roots unattached from the pot. So I'm going to turn her over here, and we've got a root tip coming out here at the bottom. Let's just make sure it's not attached. So I'm just taking the tag, because it's really thin tag, and just ever so slightly pushing under there just to make sure it's not attached. And we're going to get her hopefully out of this pot. And keep an eye on this root here. I'm holding the base of the stem. And if she's not coming out, then she probably still has some roots attached to the plastic. So I'm going to take my trusty little name tag here and just kind of run it down along the side. Make sure I don't feel any roots attached. I'm looking down here as well, looking for new root tips. Oh, I do see a lot of roots in here. This is really good. She's got a lot of new roots growing. I think probably we've got some roots stuck to the bottom. It's going to be my guess. Even though I don't see any that are attached. There we go. There we go. Okay. And okay. So on the bottom here, we have terracotta. If your clay pots that you've got your orchids in, if they break, keep them. These are great little shards. Make sure they're not, really, really sharp. But they make great bottoms to your pots. You can put those down in the bottom. It'll help weight down the plastic pot. Give it a little bit of structure there. So I'm going to get these out here. And we have cats in the house, and they just recently knocked over one of my orchids. So I definitely have a broken up pot that we can use down the bottom here. Oops, there's another part of an older tag. Oh, and I wasn't careful enough. I broke some vellum on this little root tip right here. Wasn't paying attention here as well as I should have. Okay. Alrighty, we're going to go and clean up this now, and I will. Lots of broken down. Oh, you know what is also that she was also potted in? I had forgotten about that. Little pebbles. There's some forgot what it was called, but little tiny bits of an inorganic media that she was in. So I'm going to wash this off now. Go run her through the shower, hose her down, and I will be right back. Get all of this cleaned up. Let's see here. I think I'm just gonna try to place her, or not. Lay her down this way here. She'll be fine right there. Get all this cleaned up, and I will be right back, and we'll finish potting her up. Alrighty, we've got her all cleaned off. And now what we're going to do is, this is a very healthy root system here. Look at that. There's only very few dead roots here that have rotted that I can they're just coming right off. The other ones that I might need to cut off, we're going to get our pruners here, and I'm going to take my torch. This is a little butane torch, and I'm going to sterilize my cutting tools here. This, you can really do a better job than alcohol. Alcohol, you need to soak it much longer. Here, I can just burn off any pathogens. Also, this will heat up the blades and cauterize any cuts that I do. Okay, that's good enough there. Okay, so hopefully you can see down in here. Maybe what we need to do here is change the camera angle so that you can see me trimming this off here. So we're just going to start here with, all of this is firm, this root tip here, until we get to here. So I'm going to cut this off. So this one. Now I want to show you something here. Let's see if I can find the end of this root. Okay, look at this. Do you see how this root is green? Because I just soaked this. But look here. Look how dry this is here all the way up to the rhizome. A lot of people would think, oh, look at all this right here. Let's just cut it. I'm starting to believe that the root itself, which you can see this here, you've got a root. See this little thin part right here? This is the root. And the vellum is the white outer coating. Look at this one here. You see this vellum right here? This is a white protective coating that covers the root. I'm starting to believe the root is still alive, but maybe the vellum is what's damaged. Because I'm starting to see with a lot of the new fertilizing regimen that I'm doing, I'm also using sea kelp extract, and I am starting to notice there will be a root and it'll have a black tip on it. And then the next thing I know, there's new green growth coming out of it. And it's just making me stop and wonder whether or not the root inside is actually viable. And the plant is still able to produce. I mean, here's another example. Look here. Look, we're green, we're firm through here. Right here, the vellum part is dyed, but look at this root. This is still firm, green. Now, there's not going to be in your roots that are not getting air, green tips, or green silvery vellum on them. This is still all viable roots on this plant. Look at this one here. We've got white, and then the green as it's starting to grow, the new growth tips here. This is all perfectly fine. This orchid has a lot of healthy roots. And if I wanted to, I don't even need to cut all of this off. And every little blemish that I see in the root system. The plant is clearly happy. The plant is clearly growing very well with all of the growth that it does have. And that is all I am going to do on these roots here. That is plenty. Okay, now the question becomes, can we get her back in this pot? I'm not 100% convinced that I'm going to be able to get her back into the same pot. Really what I was hoping to do, because I don't want to put her in a clay pot, and that's about the largest that I've got, is a clay pot to put her in. I really am concerned that I'm not going to get her back in the pot, which is always a problem when we are trying to repot a plant, is trying to get it back in the same pot. And you're asking, why do you want it in the same pot? Well, she was doing fine in this pot. I just needed to change the media out because I knew that had broken down. So let's figure out what we're going to do here. I'm trying to be really careful of this root over here laying in my palm. Getting a little worried about that one there. Alrighty, I determined that I'm not going to get her back in the same pot. So I did find this plastic pot here, and I really like it. It's a slit pot. It's got little slits right here. It's got good aeration in the pot here, and it's about a ½ an inch deeper than the other pot that she was in. Orchids like to be root bound. There's a whole bunch of them that love to be root bound. So that's why I'm not going into a really larger pot. She was in an 8-inch pot, and I'm not really going into like a 10-inch pot. I don't have room for that, to be quite honest. She's such a big girl, and so we're going to get her back into this one. I've got a little bit of some clay shards here that I can put down in the bottom just to keep the media from falling out the bottom. Any of the smaller pieces that I've got. So just put a couple pieces down in there. Also, she was in had a little bit of rock mixed in with her media. So I've got some over here that I can put down in the bottom as well. Kind of weights the pot down a little bit. If any of those small ones, let them fall through. Okay. Alrighty. So what we're going to do now is, can you see these long roots? So they are wet. So that makes them a little bit more pliable. So I'm going to take them and I'm just going to start wrapping them up here around the other root ball, just kind of making like a little ball with the roots. I am being gentle with them the best I can. Really long in here. We're going to spiral it around a little bit here. Well, let's see here. Okay. Okay. Okay, I am going to leave her leaning like she was in the other pot, because the natural habitat or growth habit, if you want to say that better, of Phalaenopsis, a lot of them, they lean because they're epiphytes. They're growing on the sides of trees. They're growing down in the little crooks of the trees, and they're going to lean. That way when it rains, they don't get crown rot because the water can run off and not sit down in the crown. So I'm going to go ahead. She's naturally wanting to do this. Let's just let her go. Right now over here in this side, I've got a bark mix that has sphagnum moss and perlite and charcoal and fir bark in it. There's some redwood chips in here as well. And I'm just going to start putting it down in there. Now she's right now kind of moved a little bit more to this side, so it's a little bit hole over here, so I can get my hands down in there and get that media down into the middle of the pot as well. I think she's going to just lean right there, and that will be good. And while I'm doing this, we can learn a little bit more about her heritage. Like I said earlier, she is 50% Ambonesis. That is a polychilous. That is your summer blooming Phalaenopsis, such as Bellinas and Violacea, Ambonensis. There are also a lot of those are sequential bloomers as well. Now she's not a sequential bloomer. Once she throws her flower spike and they bloom, they're there. These flowers are on there 5-6 months. She started blooming in early February and finished towards the end of July. Almost 6 months she was blooming. Versus a sequential bloomer like the polychilous type forms of Phalaenopsis, they're going to have 1 or 2 flowers on them, and then that flower is going to die, but at the same time they're producing more buds, and then that's the sequential. And you'll see that the nodes are also closer together, and you see how these are further apart. So that's another thing. So she's getting a lot of that habit from Amabilis. She's 25% Amabilis. Ooh, I missed the pot there and got more in my lap than in the pot. Okay, now I do know that this plant, because I've had her for 23 years, I know her habit. And we're going to end up top dressing this with sphagnum moss. I've had her where she had aerial roots. She just really doesn't like aerial roots. And I've had her have some aerial roots and they just sit there. They don't do a thing. And as soon as I top dressed with a little sphagnum moss, got a little bit of moisture, humidity around those roots, they just took off like gangbusters. So I'll definitely be top dressing her with, and I've got some right here, some New Zealand sphagnum moss as well. And of course, when we're done, we're going to write on the back of the tag, I'm going to do that now with a little Sharpie, that I repotted her in August of 2023 is when she was repotted. And I'll put the tag back in here. Also, I have my little tags here that when she's not in bloom, then I'll know what she looks like. I do this with a lot of my plants now. My collection is getting larger and larger by the day. And when they're not in bloom, especially Phalaenopsis, especially my minis, they all look the same. But if I put a little tag on it, it will remind me of what that flower is actually going to look like. And I think we had, I don't know if you heard that in the background, but Chicken Nugget is down here. He's our little beige cat, and he's probably calling his sister down here as well. So he's off that way, kind of moseyed down here while I was filming. So I'm going to keep repotting this, and I will see you guys next time. If you have any questions, any comments about what I've done, don't hesitate to ask me. Just put them down in the comments, please. I'd love to hear from you. And I'm curious, actually, does anybody have this plant? I don't know how many there were of Phalaenopsis Maraldee, and I'd just love to know if anybody has it. Also, we were talking about earlier how she has, since the last time I did the video where I introduced her, let's put this back here. When I introduced her and she was still had flowers on her, we talked about this new leaf here that had grown, and I was hoping that it would be as big as this one. This one was about 10 and a half, about 10 3/4 inches long. So let's see how much this one has grown since that time period. And let's measure it here, and we are about 10 1/4, 10 and a half. And so not quite as long as this one. I'm okay with that. I am. And the reason why is she's put on so much growth. She had flowers that she had needed to have energy for. She grew a new leaf. She's been going gangbusters, growing new roots. And also she started growing this new leaf here. And so she was having a lot of energy. And if this one is just ever so short, so what? She is happy as can be, loving life. And I'm going to finish her up. And until next time, guys, happy orchid growing. Bye.